everyone, my name is Tiffany and this is my channel, Hoosier Handmade. Thank you so much for stopping by today. In today's video, we are talking about my do's and don'ts for sewing size inclusive. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around. If you are new to my channel, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope that you will consider subscribing before you leave. I would love to get to know you better and welcome you into the sewing community. And thank you so much to each one of my friends who keep coming back video after video. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend a little bit of it with me. It means so much to me. Thank you so much for your kindness and your support and your friendship. What am I wearing today? I always forget to talk about this, but I do always put the information down below in the description box. So this is for you, Blanche. I'm actually remembering today to talk about what I'm wearing. This is the Ellie and Max Staycation dress. This was my very first one. I fell in love with that pattern and it is probably my all-time favorite pattern. I have went on to make so many versions, but this is my first one made with some double brush poly from Walmart of all places. So love this dress, love that pattern. I'll never stop recommending it. So there you go, Blanche, I remembered. Okay, let's get on with today's video. I have so much information that I'm stuffing into this one video. I hope that this isn't going to be too much for you all. I hope I don't go too long here. I am very passionate about this topic, about sewing size inclusive and having those patterns available to the size inclusive community. And when I say size inclusive, it's not just bigger sizes that I'm talking about, it's also smaller sizes. Maybe you're smaller than a size 4 and the pattern companies start their patterns at the size 4. So maybe some of these tips will help you as well if you are a smaller sized sewist, but I'm really going to focus in on what I do to sew more size inclusive for myself, to help myself use more patterns that are out there. And I'm also going to mention some things that I absolutely refuse to do as a size inclusive sewist. So the sewing community is trying to go more size inclusive. The big 4 are trying to include more pattern sizes, more packets for a more size inclusive community. And that's wonderful, that's great, but we're still not at 100%. And in my mind, in a perfect world, we all should have the opportunity to sew everything. Every person is important, no matter your size, and you should have access to every single pattern that is available. It's not a perfect world, you guys, so here's what I do to circumnavigate the non-perfectness of our world. The first thing that I do as a size inclusive sewist is to always look at finished garment measurements. Now I have got a plethora of patterns here in front of me. I'm going to show you examples of what I talk about. So when I talk about finished garment measurements, let me just use this simplicity pattern. I'm working on this one right now. This is a great pattern. Let me flip it to the back. That's where you're going to look for your finished garment measurements. Our gut reaction is to go to these measurements right here to look for our size. That's what's going to tell us what size pattern to make. But I, in most cases, totally ignore those. I totally ignore them. I go down here at the bottom and it says finished garment measurements. That's where I go first on every single pattern to see if that finished garment is going to be something that I can make for myself. This simplicity pattern does a really great job with the finished garment measurements, in my opinion. They give you bust and hip there, which are very important for a shirt. I'm obviously worried about the bust line. I'm worried about the hips fitting. So this was a great example. I went to my stash and pulled out an older pattern. Now this one's not super old. It's just 2018. This is a McCall's pattern, a lovely, beautiful dress. But when I flip it to the back and look at the finished garment measurements right there, they're giving me a length and a width at the bottom. They're not giving me a bust measurement and they're not giving me a waist measurement. For this dress, We see that it even has darts, so it's somewhat fitted. It has a fitted waist. I'm concerned about fitting my waist and my bust into this pattern. What you can do for older patterns like this one, or patterns that are even older that don't even mention the finished garment measurements on the packet, is you can open them up. Sometimes your finished garment measurements will be on the tissue paper themselves. They'll have a finished bust measurement or a finished waist measurement. So open up the pattern and look for those finished garment measurements. Now that's not going to help you in Joann's. Joann's employees are not going to look favorably upon you probably to open up the tissue paper. But if you have this pattern at home and you're wondering about the finished garment measurements, open it up, look at your tissue paper. If it's still not there, you can do some measurements of your own. I have actually measured the bust line of a pattern piece to see if that flat pattern, if that comes near my measurements. Now, if you're sewing with knit fabric, you can stretch that number even farther because your knit fabric is going to stretch with your make as well. So best case scenario is you have those finished garment measurements on the outside of the pattern envelope, and the Big Four are trying to do that more. I just hope that they give us the measurements that we actually need. Length of the dress is a good one to have on there, but that's not paramount to me because I can adjust the length myself. It's fitting the bust and fitting the waist that I'm really worried about. So hopefully pattern companies are going to start doing that more. Now, when we talk about indie patterns, so when I say indie patterns, those are independent pattern companies outside of the Big Four, outside of Simplicity or McCall's. And I do love independent pattern companies. I love making indie patterns. And for the most part, indie patterns are always going to give you those finished garment measurements on their paper copies, or you can look them up online because they'll have all of their patterns on their website where you can print them out as PDFs or order yourself a paper copy. But they'll have those finished garment measurements. And for the most part, indie pattern companies will give you a lot of information, probably more than you would ever need. So that is what I mean by checking those finished garment measurements. So tying into that first one, my next do for myself, something that I do, is lean toward indie pattern companies. For size inclusive sewing, the indie patterns cannot be beat. For the most part, you're going to have a huge variety of sizes. A lot of them go from extra small all the way up to 6 or even 7X. I have a Waves and Wild pattern that's 7X, and that's wonderfully size inclusive. Now, like I said, if you love the Big Four patterns, they are trying to slowly integrate more inclusive sizing into their patterns. However, they are not doing that for every single pattern. Now, I know it's expensive to make all of the sizes available for every single pattern. It's probably not a great business model as far as the cost of doing it. However, as I said at the beginning of this video, I am worth having access to every single pattern. So I'm not going to be convinced that they are completely size inclusive until every single pattern is available for me as a size inclusive sewist or you. We are worth being able to access those patterns. And even the ones they are making size inclusive come in different packets. So you're going to have to buy multiple pattern envelopes in order to get those different sizes. I am kind of in between on some sizes, so I do find myself buying 2 pattern envelopes, whereas if I was to pick up this indie pattern again, this one is covering all of the sizes right here within this pattern. This one goes all the way from extra small to 4X. If this was an indie pattern, I'd have to buy at least 2 envelopes to get that much sizing with my pattern envelopes. So I'm not convinced they're 100% size inclusive. I'm still going to use my indie patterns for the best range of sizing. My next tip for sewing size inclusive, if you're a Big 4 fan and still want to use those Big 4 patterns, is to look for unisex patterns. So I pulled this one out. It's a favorite. I show it all the time. This is the 9240 that I love to make. And this one has been drafted for a man and a woman. And in doing so, they are drafting this a little bit big. So the sizing on this one says it only goes to extra large. I don't usually make an extra large size, but in making this, I've discovered that it is quite large on me as a woman. It's been drafted a little bit bigger for a bigger man, and that works perfectly for me. So I pulled another one out of my stash as well. This is a unisex PJ pattern. I have not made this one, but things like this to look for where they're giving you one set of pattern pieces for both a man and a woman are going to tend to probably run a little bit bigger, and you could probably get by with using those for a bigger size for yourself. The next thing that I look for is a pattern with bust cup options. This one is not only good for a larger bust like I have, but it also could be good for someone with a smaller bust. If you need to make smaller bust adjustments, this one is a great one to look for. Cashmerette is a great example of a bust cup option. They have C, D, E, F, and G, H, but I've also seen several Big 4 patterns come with bust cup options as well, so maybe that would be good for these smaller cupped options. Finding a pattern that does have those bust cup options really helps do the work for you. For the most part, you don't have to do a ton of adjustments to that pattern piece. They have accounted for your larger or smaller bust, so it's really, really a time saver to find a pattern with bust cup options. And then the last do that I do all the time, and I probably should have put this right under checking those finished garment measurements, is to change your seam allowance. If you love sewing Big 4 patterns, for the majority of the time, you're going to be using a 5/8 seam allowance. That's a very big seam allowance when you go to make your garments. So it gives you a lot of wiggle room. If you're feeling like there needs to be a little more space in your waist area, if that's looking a little bit small, if your numbers are right outside of those finished garment measurements, try using a smaller seam allowance, a 1/2 inch, or even I love using just a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that gives you just a little bit more wiggle room without doing any pattern adjustments. That is not adjusting anything, you are just using a smaller seam allowance. And that small little change of using just a little bit less seam allowance can make a garment fit perfectly. Now you can change the seam allowance for your entire pattern. If you need a little bit more room at the neck, or if you need a little bit more room at the waist, you can do it for the entire thing. Or like I do, you can just change a little bit. So sometimes I'll just do a different seam allowance only at the bodice line going into my waist, just to give myself a little bit more wiggle room. It's something that I do on almost every Big 4 pattern, just to give myself a little bit more space, a little bit more size. Okay, those are the things that I do very regularly to sew size inclusive. Let's talk real quick about the don'ts, the no-goes, the things that I absolutely refuse to do when I'm sewing size inclusive. And the first one is to grade up. I just don't have time in my life to take a pattern that stops at a size extra large or a size 18 and grade it up the next few sizes so that I can fit into it. There are so many patterns out there that I have not tried, or even ones that I have tried and fell in love with, that I could make myself instead of wasting my time in grading up a pattern. So I refuse to take the time to grade up a pattern. The next thing that I refuse to do is to make a ton of pattern adjustments. So every pattern company, Big 4, indie, they're all using their own proprietary block. So they're designing their garment for a certain body type. And sometimes that body type is just way too far off of what mine is. If I am taking a pattern, totally hacking it, changing it completely, every single pattern piece needs to be changed, I won't be doing it. I will be throwing that pattern away and not returning to it at all. Sometimes you just don't fit into a pattern company's block. And that's okay, because there are so many other pattern companies out there that you probably do fit into. As you sew more, as you get more experience, as you use pattern companies like the big 4 different companies and all of the independent companies, you'll start to gather a favorites list, a favorite companies list, companies that draft for a body type like yours, that you don't have to do so many pattern adjustments out there. If you haven't found them yet, keep trying, keep looking. There are so many options out there. I have found a few favorites for myself. Ellie and Mac, I love their block. It fits me really well. Love Notions is another one that's really great. Their block fits me, as well as Style Patterns, the sister company to Little Lizard King. They draft for women's clothing. I do love Style Patterns, and I found that they fit me really well as well. So keep looking for those pattern companies that don't require you to do so many pattern adjustments. And then the last don't that I don't do in size inclusive sewing is to fall into the trap of buying publications that do not include my sizing. I have 2 right in front of me, and I'm gonna share them with you. Now, don't come after me. These are very popular, but they are not size inclusive in my way of thinking, and I'm not going to support them. I'm not going to use my money to buy these when they're not going to benefit me and they're not made to include me. The first one is Simply Sewing magazine. Joann's has a beautiful magazine section, and these gorgeous magazines have drawn me in on several occasions. I love the patterns that come with them. I'm always drawn in by the beautiful patterns. But if you look on this magazine, and this one is a little bit older, like I said, I haven't bought any of these for a while, the sizing stops at 18. I'm probably not going to fit into their size 18, and it starts at an 8. So if you're a sewist that usually sews a 4 or a 2 or a 6, you might have to grade these patterns as well. So this is not size inclusive sewing. I think they are trying to extend their sizes a little bit. I've seen some magazines with now like a 4 or a 22 on the package. Still not great in my opinion. My opinion, need to be completely size inclusive. So these magazines are not getting my money anymore. Other kinds of publications that aren't getting my money anymore are books like this one. Now, please don't come for me. I know Tilly and the Buttons is so popular, and I believe her patterns, if you were to buy them off the website, are more size inclusive. But this book right here, the patterns that are included in it, is not size inclusive. I cannot fit in the patterns that are being made for this. I put this book on my Christmas list at the very beginning of my sewing journey. I was so excited to make the garments that were in here. It gives you step-by-step instructions. It's a great book. They just do not fit me. So I'm not going to be buying or spending money supporting books like this one that are not size inclusive. I just won't be doing it. Now, that was a lot of information to throw at you. If you have any questions at all about how I sew size inclusive, don't hesitate to drop those down below in the comment section. I would love to chat with you about this. Before I finish this video, I do want to leave you all with this thought. You are beautifully and wonderfully made how you are right now. Maybe you're not the size that you hope to be in the future, but you are beautiful. You are worthy of that make. You are worthy of using that beautiful fabric or that precious fabric right now, where you are in your life right now. No matter your size, you are worthy of that make. So love yourself how you are right now. If you want to change, that's perfect. Work toward that. But love yourself for now, and don't hold back. Don't wait to make your beautiful makes for yourself until you're perfect, because you're perfect right now how you are. Okay, that's gonna do it for today's video. Let me know down below in the comment section how you sew size inclusive? If you do so, maybe I'll get some tips and tricks from you all. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.